The fourth element of the covenant with Abram, is the institution of the covenant. This is found in Genesis chapter 17. In chapter 17, Abram turns 99 years old. The fullness of time has come for God to make visible his covenant with Abram. So let's read from the text, chapter 17, verses 1 through 11. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, that I may make my covenant between me and you, and may multiply you greatly. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, Behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be called Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Verse 9. And God said to Abraham, As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. So God institutes the covenant here in really two big ways. First, God gives Abram a new name, from Abram to Abraham. His new name will be Abraham, and also in verse 15, God changes Sarai's name to Sarah. Change of name. Change of name. Institution of the covenant. Secondly, God gives Abraham and his offspring a physical sign of the covenant. This will be circumcision for all males. This physical sign, it institutes the covenant. Chapter 17 concludes with God clearly telling Abraham that he will have a son through Sarah, with Sarah. And the son's name will be called Isaac, which means he laughs. He laughs. This son, Isaac, will be the son of the covenant. What a wonderful thing. What a wonderful name. The child Abraham and Sarah have waited for so long is now going to be here. God is fulfilling and instituting this covenant. In typical fashion, immediately after Abraham receives the command of the covenant, the institution, the sign of circumcision, right away, he goes and circumcises all of the males in his household, including himself. God says, this is the new sign of the covenant. Abraham puts it on all of his men. He hears, he receives, he obeys. Institution of the covenant. The fifth element of the covenant is the testing of the covenant. This is found in Genesis chapters 18 through 20. In my life, I have found that waiting for something is simultaneously difficult and typically for the best. I confess also that far too often I am impatient, and I either try to speed up the process on my own efforts, which uniformly does not end well, or I also will give up waiting just moments before something good was about to happen. Oh, alas. Do you have similar challenges that you face in your life? Perhaps face them as I do. You give up just a little bit too soon, or you try to speed up the process. To our text, Abraham and Sarah, they're just 1 year away from having their son, Isaac. And he's the son of the promise. They have waited so long. Sarah is 89 years old. Abraham is 99 years old. And yet, despite having waited so long, and despite having received God's promise directly, it seems that for both of them, their faith wavers. First, we'll look at Sarah and the test that she faced. This is from Genesis 18, verses 9 through 15. They said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" This is Abraham speaking. And he said, "She is in the tent." The Lord said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I am worn out, and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son." Verse 15. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. He said, "No, but you did laugh." Would Sarah hang on and have faith in God's promise all the way to fulfillment? Would she? Yes. But her faith was tested. God himself had to come to her and give her the promise directly. The promise of the coming son within a year. Also, God had to give her a little bit of a rebuke. He did. Her faith needed some bolstering. And yet, God himself promised in 1 year, the son is going to be here. Now, let's go to Abraham's test, found in Genesis chapter 20. The text really speaks for itself. Chapter 20. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. And he sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, "She is my sister." Sounds familiar, huh? And Abimelech, the king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." Now Abimelech had not approached her. So he said, "Lord, will you kill an innocent people? Did not he himself say to me, 'She is my sister'? And she herself said, 'He is my brother.' In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I have done this." Then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours." Verse 8. So Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told them all these things, and the men were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you, that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not to be done." Verse 10. And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What did you see that you did this thing?" Abraham said, "I did it because I thought, there is no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, 'This is the kindness you must do to me at every place to which we come. Say of me, he is my brother.'" Verse 14. Then Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male servants and female servants and gave them to Abraham and returned Sarah, his wife, to him. And Abimelech said, "Behold, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you." To Sarah he said, "Behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all who are with you, and before everyone you are vindicated." Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and also healed his wife and female slaves so that they bore children. For the Lord had closed all of the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Wow. There's a lot in the Bible, isn't there? A lot of strangeness and craziness. Personally, I find it encouraging to see that Abraham, this towering figure of faith, this man who walked with God and talked with God directly, on occasion he wavered. He struggled, didn't he? I see that Abraham, and I see him, and I realize if Abraham did that, there's hope for me. And I also find it encouraging to see that God himself protected Sarah. God protected his promise to Abraham many times. Even when we waver in our faith and our steadfastness, God does not waver, does he? When we fail, God holds firm to his promises, to his word. God holds firm to us. In the testing, sometimes we'll fail. God never fails, and he never fails for us. Whew! So after this test, Abraham would face one more, the biggest one of all. Wonder if he'll pass it. Let's see. This brings us to the final phase of the covenant. That is phase 6, the consummation of the covenant. This is found in Genesis chapters 21 through 25. The long, long awaited dream has finally come to pass. In the fullness of time, the covenant, the promise that has been given so long ago, has now come true. Sarah, the old woman, the old wife of Abraham, gives birth to a son, to Isaac. Genesis 21, verses 1 through 7. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son, who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son, Isaac, when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son, Isaac, was born to him. And Sarah said, "God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me." And she said, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? And yet I have borne him a son in his old age." Now, Sarah, she had laughed, a nervous laugh, when she heard that God would give her a son, that she would have a son. Hers was a laughter of disbelief. Abraham then laughed when he also received the same promise. His was a laughter of joyful anticipation. It was a laughter of faith. Isaac, the promised son, he is born. His name, Isaac, itself means he laughs. Ah, lovely. The whole community laughs in joy and celebration with Abraham because of this son's birth. This is a laughter of rejoicing, of consummation, of fulfillment. Different kind of laughters. They mean different things. They're all very instructive to us. Now, I mentioned there's one more test for Abraham. In a nutshell, it was perhaps the most brutal of all. Who would he love more? Would he love God or his son, Isaac? Would he pass his final test? And if he would pass it, at what cost? We'll take a closer look at the sacrifice of Isaac, along with a few other key moments in the life of Abraham in some upcoming videos. But for right now, I want to just close the whole lesson on the covenant with Abraham with a few thoughts. First is this: God makes promises, covenants, big promises to his people. His covenants bring life and hope and blessing. They bless not only the immediate people involved, but eventually the whole earth and all people on it. Second thought to leave with you: God will protect his covenants and his promises from all attacks. He will protect them from outside attacks. And threats. He will protect them sometimes from our own folly, the folly of his own people, the people to whom he made the promises. God will protect it. He will make sure the covenant comes to pass and is upheld. They will come true, by golly. Third thing, the covenants that God made with Abraham, they set the stage for the rest of the Bible following. Through many perils and challenges, and over the course of thousands of years, these covenants come true. Lastly, God has made a covenant with you. It is a conditional one. It is one of those if, then type covenants. God has sent his son, Jesus, to be your rescuer from sin, from divine wrath, from eternal punishment and eternal separation from God himself. God has promised he would do this. That promise has been fulfilled. God has kept up his part of the bargain. He sent his son, and Jesus did what he was supposed to do. He kept up his end of the covenant. Jesus came. He lived a perfect life. He volunteered and died on a cross as a substitution for you and for me. He died. He was buried. He rose again. Jesus alone has the power to forgive your sin. He alone has the power to restore you and your relationship to the Father, to God. That's it. Now, that's the then. That's what God did. Now for our part of this covenant that God has made to you. Your part is to place your faith and trust in him. You must allow him to become not only your Savior, but also your Master. Have you done this? I urge you, please do this. Do this. This covenant that God has made with you is the best covenant ever. Oh, it's the best thing you'll ever enter into. And I urge you, do it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I want you to remember that this, just like Abraham and Sarah and Isaac, you too are a beautiful, unique, and unrepeatable miracle of God. You are so valuable in God's eyes. He so wants to know you. I'll see you next time on Pastor Dan's Heart to Heart.